What's up, Bible nerds? I'm AJ Holloway, and this is 5 Minute Friday, where we explore God's stories so that we can add value to our stories. Now, in the past videos, we looked at how to read the Bible as narrative. Now, we're going to take all of that, and in this video, we're going to take a look at how to read the poetic books of the Bible. Let's get into it. Now, unlike George Lucas and Star Wars, the biblical authors obviously didn't have the use of cinematography. They didn't have the capability of using moving images to tell a story. So what they did instead was they used their language. They would use a highly sophisticated form of writing using adjectives and adverbs in their native tongue, and they would tell a story, painting these vivid pictures on the minds of the readers. And it demanded the reader would slow down and not just read it, but actually dwell upon what they read all day long. And this makes up a whopping 33% of our Bibles, which is biblical poetry. And unfortunately, this is why a large majority of biblical poetry is overlooked, because it does require that the reader actually sit down and meditate on what they have read, and not just in the moment, but all throughout the day or week. And this goes against a lot of the sensibilities of us Westerners here in America, is we like to figure it out the moment we've read it. And I can't stress this enough in this video, that biblical poetry does require that we sit with the text. This is ancient meditation literature. Also, it requires that we have a base working knowledge of the narrative portions of the Bible, which we've already discussed in other videos, which make up 43% of the Bible. Because these narrative portions of the Bible are often the background of a lot of the poems that we'll read. For example, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles makes up a large part of the background of the poetic portions of the prophetic books. Because didn't you know it? That prophets were poets. But how does ancient biblical poetry work? Let's take a look at it. Now, when most of us think of poetry, we often think of a rhythm, a cadence, and ending lines that rhyme together. For example, 1, 2, buckle my shoe. However, biblical poetry doesn't work like this. Ancient biblical poetry is often written with couplets, 2 lines placed next to each other. The first line introduces the thought, and then the second line will expound upon or develop that thought. And the Bible does this in many different ways, which we'll take a look at in this video and in another video, because there's just so much to biblical poetry that we need to take a look at. Now, in this video, we're going to look at 3 ways that second line will develop that first line of thought in biblical poetry. Let's take a look at one of them real quick. Now, in Psalm 51, the second line in the couplet can develop the idea of the first line. Check out Psalm 51. It says, "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness." Line 1. "According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions." That's line 2. So the first line, which is "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness," is the initial thought. And then the second line develops or confirms that thought, makes it more concrete. "According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions." Now, another way that the second line develops the first line is it can deepen the idea of it. For example, Psalm 19. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God," line 1, "and the sky above proclaims his handiwork," line 2. Now, you can see right here that line 1 is the heavens declare. The heavens are speaking, and they declare the glory of God. And well, the second line deepens that line because it says, what are the heavens? What are they declaring? What is the glory of God? Well, let's look at it. The second line says the sky. That's what he's referring to as the heavens above. They proclaim. So it's doing the same thing as the heavens, deepening what the heavens are. And they proclaim his handiwork. So that second line has deepened the first line. What is the glory of God? It's his handiwork. Even nature declares it. Nature is screaming that everything we see is the glory of God. So if all nature is the glory of God, what is man? Poets tell us all of these things. Now, there's a third way. The second line can contrast or resist, so to speak. It can be differing than the first line. For example, in Proverbs 10, it says, "A wise son makes a glad father." Now watch the second line. It'll reverse and contrast that. "But a foolish son is the grief of his mother." It's using these opposing nouns, father, mother. So what we're seeing is that it's two separate lines. They're contrasting one another. They're opposing one another. A wise son, a glad father, a foolish son, a grieving mother. You see how these two things, they're contrasting one another. This is biblical poetry. Now in the next video, we'll take a look at metaphors, hyperbole. We'll look at all the way that these ancient authors would use these types of grammatical rules to tell what they're trying to say. Now I can't stress this enough, and I'm going to end this video right here until the next video where we explore a little deeper. But biblical poetry doesn't have to be figured out all at once. Don't take on the burden of, I have to figure this out. I can't move on until I've completely understood what this means. You can sit with Psalms the rest of your life. You can read a line. You can blaze through it, and then you can go back and just take your time going through it. Sit with the text. Meditate on it. It's literally meditation literature. That's Psalm 1, where David says, I will sit with this letter. We will ponder upon it. We dwell with it. And it's okay. And I know that goes against everything we are as Westerners, but it is okay to do it with biblical poetry, to just sit with it and let it speak to us. It may say something a little different in each season of our lives. You may come across a portion of Psalms that doesn't make sense at all with the season of life you're currently in. But if you live long enough, you'll be able to sit with Psalms, you'll be able to sit with Ecclesiastes, you'll be able to sit with all these wisdom literatures, and you'll be able to take something from them that you wouldn't have got at another time in life. That's it for this video. If it's added value to your study time, consider giving us a subscription and a thumbs up. And thank you for all the support. Until next week, see you next time. This is Hebrew ancient and unfortunately, stupid. And unfortunately,